agCelerant is one such example, and I guess the only one that I know of that really is built on the concept of phygital agriculture. And what you see on your screen right now is a picture of some of our colleagues working in a field in Kiboko in Kenya, where they are trialing a set of IoT rain gauges that we want to use to help advise farmers on good agricultural practices, improved sowing dates, reducing basis risk for insurance, and also helping reduce the cost of agricultural credit through abated interest rates. So oops, I have to change my, okay, here we go. So I won't go back into this, oops, I've been too fast. All right, so I won't go back in much detail in what has already been touched. As you know, we always have the choice between importing and producing locally. And I think that's one of the quite interesting opportunities that COVID has given us, is that we realize that increasingly a precursor to food security should be food sovereignty. And that is, those numbers that you see on the screen are examples from an analysis we did of the rice value chain in Senegal, where we do see that there is really an opportunity to improve investment in the production of local rice of various qualities that is still going to yield a number of benefits and margins for a certain number of users. And we use a variety of digital tools to do that, but not only, as has been discussed, digital alone is not always sufficient to make it. So one example, and that's already been explained by Daniel, is at a very simple biophysical level. We know that in low input systems, the variability in yield primarily depends on the variability in management, even before the soil types and the rainfall levels, if you will, and reason at a landscape level. And one of the big elements of management is fertilization rates. And that is not something you can easily measure by magic, I would say, out of a satellite or a UAV or other device. To really know about it, you have to have someone directly interact with the farmer and ask the question. So for even critical biophysical dimensions of being able to understand how a value chain operates, you still need very close proximal presence and interaction. So this really provides us the framework for a number of pillars. We have 6 pillars in agCelerant that contribute to this orchestration of value creation in the value chain. The first one I mentioned is the knowledge of actors, and I'll give a few examples of that. More generally, the knowledge of the market. You need to have expert knowledge, both at an agronomic level, at an economic level, of how a value chain operates in context. Value chains can be extremely different according to crops and geographies and proximity to different urban areas. They have different levels of structuration, integrity, etc. And this really requires a lot of local intelligence. Likewise, we need to provide business services, because if you want to make this thing sustainable, it's not only about collecting data and then disappearing. It's really about making the ecosystem of data a live engine, which is actually fueled by business. This involves a lot of capacitation effort, and we will talk a little bit about that. It also provides the opportunity to greatly improve our ability to monitor the impacts, the outcomes and impact of the introduction of digital tools and other services into the value chain. And finally, it needs to be supported by sustainable business models in order to be scalable. So if you look at, for example, an agricultural value chain, we will typically have those 2 dented wheels. The upper right one is the one that deals with the technologies, including earth observation, mobile, lean data management, AI, etc. And this one really aims to facilitate access to credit in the first place, protected by insurance, allowing better access to supplies, increasing productivity in production, and market integration. But this cannot be done alone unless you have a very strong human interface, and that's the lower left dented wheel. which is anchored on creating jobs essentially for youth in the rural sector, franchising them, helping them qualify producers, advising them, and transforming the whole value chain. So I'll give a few examples of how by connecting producers with banks, insurers, etc., controlling exposure to risk and increasing productivity and quality of harvest, we help de-risk investment in the value chains. So the first tool that we're using is AirMap for ag investment risk mapping and profiling. And to show you a little bit of what that entails, I'm going to shift to our web platform. So I'm asking Ted to confirm that you can actually see my web page right now.
No problem. We can see it clearly.
Very good. So this is focused on Senegal. So I'm going to zoom live into the Senegal River Valley, where we know that most of the rice production of Senegal comes from. Each one of those little dots that you see is a farmer cooperative. It could be structured in various ways. And then as we zoom in, we do see the individual producers appear. So bear with my bandwidth. It will take a little bit of time to load. But as you go further down into the detail, you will see that we can monitor each individual productive plot related to background satellite imagery, and have a number of quantitative and qualitative information that give us information about the endowment levels of a particular household, the productive potential of a particular plot, which is a function of the soil type, for example, etc. And then you can use all that information, and we have really a fairly large set of data. I could give an example in Ghana, for example, where you would see this producer of soybean is identified, fully referenced in terms of the social context, the household budget, the need for financing, and the connection with different types of financial institutions, need for bridging loans, etc. This information can then be organized and aggregated and provided to different stakeholders, and one of them is typically the bank. And if you see my slide right now back on your screen, we can aggregate for a given cooperative here in Diawar in the Senegal River Valley, what a loan installment for the whole cooperative and for its individual members actually mean in terms of aggregated numbers. So the cost of agricultural insurance, agricultural advisory, the costs of providing water, et cetera, et cetera. Second component is what we call BRISC, for Basis Risk Reduction Instrument, and support knowledge. So this one looks, whereas AirMap really looked at how do you qualify farmers for a particular level of loan prior to the start of the season, BRISC is really about monitoring how the season unfolds and certifying, in fact, the reality of agricultural activity on the individual plot. So the way this works is that, for example, if you look at rice again and look on the x-axis at the season from land offsetting to parcel flooding to crop monitoring to harvest, we will monitor through different means, EO, IoT, mobile, individual plots, and we will look inside those plots whether they have crossed a particular management threshold. For example, in the parcel flooding area, you will see that at the penultimate date, an individual plot is still red because it has not been flooded, obviously not reported flooded by the agent, not seen flooded by the satellite, and therefore it would be risky for a banker to actually provide a loan to that farmer because that farmer is obviously not ready, having not flooded the field, to sow it. So there's no point actually providing a loan to that farmer to buy seeds and fertilizer. Whereas maybe 5 days later in the system that we implement based on Sentinel-2 data from the Copernicus missions, we can see that the plot is now flooded, and therefore we could tell the banker who's privy to the system, well, for this plot, the farmer is ready to sow. So you may release one installment of credit. And what this allows us to do effectively is to completely disaggregate over time and space the provision of credit to individual smallholders, which is a very big liability when it's not possible, as you probably know. So I could give again a few examples of what that looks like in the real world by zooming on an individual field again in this Senegal River Valley, maybe looking at completed season for 2019 and looking at different fields that were monitored. And you can see that for different steps of management, from plowing to flooding to crop growth and harvesting, we can monitor through different AI methods and also field-based whether the farmer has respected a particular cropping agenda and calendar. So if we look at this gentleman, for example, we will see his individual plot, and we will look, for example, at what time the flooding was declared to have been done. You see that the agent collected the farmer as having flooded the field on 8th of July 2019, and we can cross-check that against satellite imagery, whereby we see here on a sorry, that was August, 1st of August, it's not yet flooded, but on the 11th of August, you start to see in near real time the water entering the field. So we can actually find different ways of certifying whether the activity as it is declared is indeed happening. And you can see how from both satellite on the top and the ground, we actually monitor how the crop is being progressing and the farmer implementing the management levels he's supposed to do. So I'm going to complete now with the third and last aspect, which is target, and that's the third component of our system. So just a second while it loads. Here we go. So target is really about what happens at the time of harvest. And here, in fact, you're going to see examples from the cocoa value chain where we can see here an individual analysis coming in from a farmer. And we can see how the harvest lot has gone through a whole set of validations, from the reception of the lot, waiting for the analysis of the harvest lot, the validation of the analysis, the inception of the transaction, its validation, and the payment to the farmer. This can be then aggregated at the level of a whole set of farmers or several cooperatives. We can monitor for a particular season here in 2018 how stocks have evolved in different warehouses that are part of the digital value chain. And we can finally have a total overview of what the outcome of that particular cropping season was, which is essential for example, a supply chain manager or even a banker to assess the performance of a particular investment. So this is done through also a very strong human component that we call agCelerant Academy. It involves several levels, not only people on the working on the ground as franchised, but also back office supervisors who curate the data, interact with the agents, provide supervision, and also people who work, as you saw before in this background picture, as AI developers. And we have a very striving collaboration with the African Institute of Mathematical Sciences, providing us many scholars every year to develop those automated methods. Finally, this is the supporting business model, if you will, for $800 per hectare of a loan given to an individual farmer. Much of it is going to go into inputs and seeds, but also into mechanization services. But a small fraction of it is going to cover the cost of the insurance premium. And even part of it can be earmarked for the development of our own R&D methods to still make the system more efficient and optimized. And this generates a benefit of about $2,000+ for that particular hectare of production, assuming that the farmer is able to increase by 60% his or her output. I'm going to finish by saying that we can use this to monitor social benefits, and we already have built in the systems ways to sorry, I actually skipped one part, but I'll show it maybe later. We can monitor how farmers individually are faring in terms of the socioeconomic impact. So you could look, for example, at the propensity of a farmer to have his children work on the field in case, for example, the mother is involved in trade or agricultural production. And we know that in the case of mothers who are involved in trade, and we have this for the different countries where we work in, we do see the impact. If you see here, for example, that children involved in field activities or child labor or farm work is quite significant. But if we look at women who are involved in trade at the household level, then we can see to what effect this is going to affect the propensity of children working on the field. So I will conclude now. I hope I'm not over time. I've not really checked it. But saying that we are working and we're privileged to work with the Islamic Development Bank, ISDB, on the Regional Rice Value Chain Program to implement this system. So it is now ongoing in Niger Republic, but is planned to also be kicked off in the other countries. So that's 10 countries total, of which the 5 first, Niger, Guinea, Sierra Leone, the Gambia, and Senegal, are already running and will soon be joined by Mali, Burkina, Benin, Cameroon, and Cote d'Ivoire. So I guess I should probably stop at this point, Ted, to also acknowledge the different collaborators we have, both in the financial sector, in the development community, at the government level, like the Federal Ministry of Ag and Research and Rural Development in Nigeria, our friends from Swiss Re, Spacebell, CG, CCAF, Secresat, etc. I thank you for your attention, and I relinquish my hosting capabilities.